not really just process.
Good morning, how are you? It is a Friday morning, August the 14th, 2020, just after 9:30. I'm Lee Med. This morning, welcoming you to the latest in our series of virtual business breakfasts with our MSPs from across Dumfries and Galloway. If you have any questions for our guest this morning, you can either pose the question using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen down there, or you can email it to me direct, lee.med@dgchamber.co.uk, as a few of you have already done. I've got the screens open over to my left-hand side here, so all the questions will come in there, and we'll ask Emma those questions throughout the course of the morning. As mentioned, our guest this morning has had quite a varied and interesting career. Born and raised in Stranraer, she moved to Annan and then later in life, where she continued her education. Emma Harper spent time working for the NHS, both north and south of the border, before heading to the US, where she worked at the world famous Cedar Sinai Hospital. She moved back to Dumfries after 14 years away, where she met her husband Robertson, and on a return she worked at DGRI as a recovery room and theatre nurse, and then as a clinical educator. In May 2016 she was elected as an MSP, and since then she has been a champion for our region. She's passionate about tourism and animal welfare, amongst other things. She is a member of the Culture, Tourism, Europe and External Affairs Committee. She's on the Health and Sport Committee, as well as the Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee. Our guest this morning is MSP Emma Harper. Good morning, Emma.
Hi, good morning, Lee. Good morning, everybody who's listening out there.
How are you? How are you adapting to the new normal? How have you found things over the past 4 or 5 months?
Extremely busy, but from a desktop or from a table in front of a computer. So it's been what, March and 20th was lockdown. So I was basically back in the constituency for that whole time. I have noticed I've had a lot less mileage on my car since lockdown. That's been very interesting, because we're starting to look at how digital technology has basically reduced the need for certain car journeys. I mean, for me, I love getting out and meeting folk and speaking to folk face to face. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but the digital Zoomness is something that I've rapidly adopted along with a lot of folk, and you can see the pros and cons of that, but definitely less mileage on the car has been something that I've seen.
It has been something that lots of people have enjoyed, the being at home, the working from home, maybe the Zooming, because it has, as you said, allowed us to communicate in a way and with people that we normally wouldn't have been able to do on an everyday basis. I travel quite a lot between Dumfries and Stranraer. Obviously, that's 2 hours there, 2 hours back, which sometimes for one meeting just isn't very practical. But have you found that using Zoom, you've been able to connect with your constituents in a completely different way? Because you were doing online Zoom meetings and Zoom Zoom appointments during this, haven't you?
Yeah, we try to use Zoom for like a Zoom surgery process, and that's and again, it's about, well, do people want to wait for a few days or a week to get their item that they have an issue with sorted? So mostly we've found that as we've started to set up the Zoom surgeries, people have been able to get their problem solved by a phone call. But we've found that the Zoom meetings have definitely allowed me to connect with community councils. So on a Monday night, when I would normally be driving or heading up to Parliament, the Wigtonshire Community Council meet at that time when I'm on the road. So I've been able to connect that way, so that instead of driving up to Parliament, I was connecting with the Community Council. We've done lots of other Zoom meetings with constituent representatives as well, and I find that that has been very helpful over the different platforms out there like, you know, we've had Blue Jeans and Zoom and other web platforms, but it's something that people have adopted rapidly, and we've seen that with our GP engagement, and how people are now using this similar process called Near Me to get their doctor's appointments. And that has been something that has been in process for more than 10 years, but now with lockdown, it's been rapidly adopted by the doctors as well as the patients that need to be seen.
It has just opened a whole new world for so many of us, allowing people that would normally be isolated in a rural economy, in a rural area like Dumfries and Galloway, to get that engagement, to be part and to keep their finger on the pulse and get attention when they need it. But how have you found, have you been any complaints or anything from people that haven't been able to use this technology in the way we have? Obviously, as more and more of us have been working at home, it has been putting a strain on some of the broadband infrastructure. And we know Dumfries and Galloway is at times patchy at best.
Definitely. We've had, I was out a couple of weeks ago at Dalry, so one of the first times I was out in the 5 months, that so as we were easing, and one of the people that I met was specifically raised a rural broadband connectivity issue for her job. And so since then, we've picked that up as a case to look at how can we support certain pockets of rural communities in the R100 programme. So it's definitely been an issue that's been raised, because now if there's families with parents working from home, kids trying to download their schoolwork, it can be a challenge on some of the broadband speeds. And I think people have noticed that at certain times of the day, when everybody's logging on, it can be a challenge. And this is something that I'm definitely aware of, and we've also picked this up with the Minister for Connectivity, Paul Wheelhouse. So yeah, it's a challenge, and each case that's coming in, we're addressing them individually.
And how have those cases that have been coming in been dealt with through your office? Because obviously you have been very busy. It's been an unprecedented time, and people have had questions throughout the course of this, whether it was with business rates, whether it was with CBILS, whether it was with a range of funding that was, or perhaps, as we discovered throughout it, wasn't available because there were businesses, there were organisations that slipped through the cracks through those initial funding sources. What was it like for yourself as the voice of your constituency, actually hearing these concerns, and what steps, what was it like actually taking it back to Scottish Government? Because obviously the Scottish Government were very responsive in being able to find new pockets of funding to plug some of those gaps that were missed first time round.
Yeah, we've, I mean, I know myself, and along with my other South Scotland colleagues, have had lots of contact from lots of businesses. One of the first things I did as soon as we had lockdown was ask my team to contact businesses. So we put out over 600 letters to proactively tell folks what was going on, tell people about the mechanisms that were available to support them. And we did get a number of responses. So as far as the last numbers I checked, we had about 187 DG businesses that I have been able to support and engage with in various ways, big businesses, wee businesses. We have a lot of micro businesses across Galloway, but the business support has been interesting because there's been people that have fallen through the cracks, and that's something that those folks that when they do come to me, I will obviously directly engage with Kate Forbes and Fiona Hislop and Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing, depending on what the nature of the inquiry is. But it's been a real interesting issue to see how businesses have been completely affected by this pandemic, and then of course the shutdown and everything.
It has been, the way it's been dealt with by national and by Scottish Government, I really think has been eye-opening a lot of the times. It's been the one time, certainly in the time that I can remember as being an adult, that we've actually seen people question, people concern, and almost instant action being taken place. And I think regardless of your political colours across Dumfries and Galloway, you have to turn around and applaud what the Scottish Government has done to support businesses here in the south of Scotland. It's been absolutely superb. But again, there's so many. You said we have a lot of micro businesses. We have an economy, I would say, Emma, probably unlike anywhere else. In Scotland, we have tourism, we have agriculture, we have an amazing number of crafters and creators in the creative industries. We have food and drink, we've got hotels, we've got such an amazing amount, and the support that has been coming out for those businesses has been good. And one of the key ones for us, obviously, is tourism. And there's been a lot of questions raised about where does tourism go from here. I think there were a lot of businesses concerned that, you know, we've lost Easter, we've lost a bulk of the summer. Would many of these businesses survive? I know, obviously, your husband and yourself, you've got a bed and breakfast, so you're very going to be on point with what is going on, the feelings in the hospitality sector. How have you found since lockdown has been lifted? Has there been that support coming in terms of returning visitor numbers? Has it been a gradual build, or has it just bang landed all of a sudden?
The tourism is obviously an interesting or a key focus for our area, Dumfries and Galloway, as you've mentioned. And now that the Rural Economy Cabinet Secretary has picked up the tourism brief, I think that's a fantastic match, because we know there's a lot of agri-businesses that have tourism, like cafes, farm shops, holiday cottages on their properties as well. And as you say, like a lot of our businesses are the small craft businesses as well that will depend on tourism and that tourist pound to support them. But there have been people that have fallen through the cracks. We've discovered that there's been businesses that didn't qualify for support, and we found that was some businesses weren't actually registered with HMRC. And so what we've been able to do is help people get through that paperwork process and support them in that way as well. So that's been good. We've also been able to work with other tourism businesses, like wedding venues is a big issue right now. I raised it with Fergus Ewan yesterday in Chamber, because weddings can go ahead, but they're limited in the number and the people that are in a particular indoor setting. And it's not fair for maybe big wedding caterers, and it's a real challenge to make sure that there's a balance between, like weddings have a particular effect of people gathering, hugs, kisses, food, drinks, buffet, dancing, laughing, singing. So that is something that's a real challenge to pick apart. How can we do it really, really safely? Our other tourism challenges are obviously the folks coming into the area and staying in self-catering accommodation, which is safe. And then how we then support those folks who are then wanting to eat out in the community or visit some of our beaches, which some really diverse challenges that we've had to look at. In some of the information I have in front of me, it looks like the Scottish Government has provided 11.5 billion to the Scottish economy, supporting tourism and jobs. And Visit Scotland have been very proactive in supporting tourism as well, and encouraging folk to have a staycation, which I think that has been something that we've seen has been very positive.
We have seen an increase in those staycations. We've seen, as I've been out and about over the past couple of weeks since lockdown restrictions have been eased somewhat, we have seen a lot of tourists. We've seen a lot of visitors from across the border, which has been nice. But how do we balance that concern between getting the tourism and the visitor economy back on its feet and back up to track, while still having that little niggle in the back of our head about trying to look after and be safe and be secure? Because if I can just double check, I'm sure I saw this came out late last night. and it's on the Daily Record website, so you can take this whatever way you wish. It says Dumfries and Galloway has been identified as one of 6 new UK coronavirus hotspots. So that came out at 10 to 10 last night. So obviously that's a difficult one to manage. How do we get that economy back on track whilst keeping ourselves nice and safe?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was raised to me this morning from not the Daily Record, but another national newspaper, that Dumfries and Galloway was seen as on the hotspot list. And, you know, my understanding is that our numbers are really, really low. And so I'm trying to track where they have us listed as a hotspot, and that might be related to the Anne and Gretna small outbreak that we had recently. And you know that when the researchers are gathering data, it might be data that's from a couple of weeks ago or a month ago. So that's something that's really, really interesting. First Minister has said that we will have outbreaks in different places, and we know that we are very, very close to the north of England in Dumfries, but then maybe not as much in the west in Stranraer. But the management of a pandemic means that we need folks to help and all do their bit. So when we are encouraging people to wear face coverings or masks, we want people to see that that's a good thing and not an obstructive thing. I wore a face covering and sometimes like outfits like I was a spaceman when I worked in the operating theatre. So I spent 30 years wearing a mask in my job in the operating room environment, and visors and double gloves and gowns and aprons and all of that. And it's not the most comfortable thing, but we want people to obviously, you know, follow the guidance from the Scottish Government. We've been really, really fabulous and remarkable at keeping the reproduction number, the R number of the virus really, really low. But, you know, yes, there's going to be challenges, because we've just seen another 300 COVID positive cases in a place that makes sandwiches for Marks and Spencer's. And that's in the north of England as well. So we've got, you know, real challenges because we've got a border that's really, really close. But when we're encouraging people to come and be tourists or come and visit the region, we also want to be respectful and guide them to follow what the Scottish rules are, you know, hand washing, face coverings, 2 metre distance, don't go to crowded beaches, don't go to crowded pubs. And that way we can help protect each other, because there's a pandemic, the virus hasn't gone away. We want to make sure that we can manage it in a way that doesn't overwhelm our hospitals and our intensive care units. That's what we were expecting, and that's what we were prepared for. But it's been really good that what we've seen in Scotland has been the ability to control and suppress this virus.
You mentioned guidance there, and it's important that we here in Scotland have all been speaking to the guidance that has been issued by Scottish Government, but sometimes it's very difficult when you are out and about and you see people that aren't adhering to that guidance, whether they be local, whether they be visitors. And we've got one question came into me this morning from Maureen Chand. She says, Lee, could you please ask Emma, who do you think should actually be responsible for keeping an eye on guidance? In the past couple of weeks, we've seen an increased number of camper vans parking in car parks and picnic areas. Last weekend, there were vehicles in the Mull of Galloway car park with their awnings out and running showers at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, there has to be some control over this sort of thing. It's great that people are cleansing themselves, and that's fantastic. But at the same time, how can we actually ensure that people, when they are visiting the region, are not essentially just taking the mick with a lot of this stuff? Certainly it seems to be that Maureen's witnessed here. How do we turn that guidance into having a quiet word and not getting a mouthful of abuse?
Yeah, well, thanks, Maureen, for that question. We've had different ways of hearing how approaches are made to guide people, and one of the things that the police are doing is encouraging people educating them, and then moving to a level of enforcement. So right back from the beginning, the police were using these 3E approaches. And so I would ask if anybody would use the same kind of methodology. But we've had some issues with verbal abuse and aggressive behaviour towards the water bailiffs in Lough Ken, for instance. And that's been something that I've been able to pick up with the case, contact our chief of police, and you know, it's a real shame that it's a very, very, very small number of people that like tarnish all the campers or all the wonderful campers that are not leaving rubbish behind. So I would encourage our community safety officers, our police. There's been call for more community and safety engagement, but if anybody's uncomfortable in approaching somebody who's acting illegally, I would suggest that they would call our police, because they are prepared to deal with it. That would be probably the best, safest suggestion. I think a gentle, quiet word is something that some of our farmers have been doing with people who are walking their dogs in fields where there might be livestock. And that's obviously an issue that's high on my agenda with my livestock worrying members bill. But that sometimes we've heard that a gentle ask can be received very negatively. And so at that point, I would probably tell people to walk away and ask for other members of the authorities to get involved.
Thank you for that one. Keep your suggestions and your questions coming in. lee.med@dgchamber.co.uk, or you can, as I say, drop them into the question and answer box. Sarah will get to your question in just a few moments' time as well. Another one that comes up on the subject of guidance and rules and advice comes to us in relation to the hospitality and tourism industry. Suzanne Thorpe has been in touch. Good morning, Suzanne. She says, Lee, in order to safeguard tourism businesses in the future, why are there not clear rules rather than general guidance for businesses? If, in reference to pubs and clubs, are told maintain 2-metre distances between customers, they should be seated at all times, and staff who interact with customers must wear face masks and coverings, there would surely be a lot less misinterpretation of the guidance and clarity for both businesses and customers. And I suppose this is the thing, when the guidance is coming out, it has been open to an awful lot of misinterpretation, hasn't it? So why has the government decided to go for guidance as opposed to clear, stringent rules?
Thank you, Suzanne. Again, it is interesting. We've followed this whole process about guidance versus just make it the rule of law. And we've got many, many businesses, many cafes that can maybe only sit 2 or 3 or 6 people, and they're tiny wee businesses that don't even have front pavement access. And then there's other businesses like giant Witherspoons in Edinburgh, for instance, high ceilings, multiple rooms, can space tables out and have the ability to put perspex infrastructure between tables. So the guidance has meant that people that have these diverse sizes of businesses, some with outside gardens that can then facilitate maybe more people, the guidance has meant that we can then help look at advising people, because the businesses are so diverse in how they operate, so that we don't want to just lay down the law, because that would mean some businesses would just not be able to open.
I think that's a great way. And again, Suzanne, if you've got any further questions on that, I will pass you on Emma's contact details so you can take that up and speak to her team there. Emma, one thing that has become very much in the forefront of people's minds during this period of change has been mental health and mental health in the workplace. And I know you're a convener of the Parliament's Mental Health Cross-Party Group. How important is it that businesses actually view mental health support as not just a simple tick box exercise at times like these, but as something that actually makes a real difference in people's lives? Because obviously we're normally in a pre-COVID environment, we'd be able to see our staff, we'd be able to catch up, would have that interaction, would be able to tell just by body language, if something wasn't right. You know, we'll have that shorthand, that dynamic with the people we work with. You don't necessarily get that. So it's a lot easier to hide things over a Zoom call.
That's right. Mental health has been a big issue that has been addressed. And as you said, I am the convener of the Mental Health Cross-Party Group, and our upcoming meeting is specifically going to focus on COVID and mental health. And I've heard a lot of people that have had, I don't know, acute anxiety, folk that you would think would take it on the chin and just get on with it, but have really not done very well. And a lot of this is in relation to the fact that the people that you think would manage no problem have got parents or grandparents or kids that are shielding. So we obviously need to be very attuned to the mental health of everybody. And health and well-being is something that is huge on the agenda anyway, even before COVID, because we know that in order to have physical health, you need to have good mental health and vice versa. So health and well-being has become almost like a phrase that is used. So we know that for healthcare providers, there's been a particular focus for them on checking in their mental health with looking at, well, how are people coping? And as far as Zoom calls, it is interesting because you might, people might get on a Zoom meeting for an hour, and then after that, we don't know how are they doing. So I think it's important that the leadership in any organisation or any business is actively seeking information from people saying, how are you doing? You know, a simple thing like that, is everything okay? How are you doing? Is there anything you need? One of the things that I have done as a volunteer to phone people who are rural, isolated, people who might not have family, is that the two questions that we always ask them at first is, do you have food? And do you have your medicines? And how are you doing? So it is really important. And one thing we do have in Scotland is a minister who happens to be a mental health nurse. So she has definitely got her finger on the pulse, to use an analogy, on checking in and making sure that we invest appropriately to support people's mental health through this.
Is it going to be more of an issue in an area such as Dumfries and Galloway, where we have a lot of, how should I put this very carefully, more established businesses which are still in the hands of the old guard as such, who probably don't themselves have a clear understanding of what mental health actually is? And it's a case of the old school belt and braces, well, you just keep the stiff upper lip and you just get on with things approach.
I think everybody is learning what it means to have good mental health or poor mental health. We now have it's a less stigmatized approach as well. It's okay not to be okay. Our recognizing that, you know, we need to check on them, or they need to check on each other. We've got a rural mental health forum led by Jim Hume. He's a former MSP, and Jim has been really proactive in engaging the rural areas and farmers to look at supporting mental health. But it is interesting. I mean, a lot of people might just say, well, just buck up and get on with it. But more and more, we're finding that there is knowledge and education, there's less stigma, and people are understanding that this has been a challenge. Well, COVID has been a challenge, and other work has been done even before COVID to support people in businesses to say, well, what can you do to support the mental health? And it can be just as simple as knowing who's got family at home that are shielding, who's got family that are 300. perhaps had a negative experience in this pandemic. And, you know, we must not forget that, you know, there's thousands of people have died because of this. And obviously that causes additional heartache for people. So I would ask any businesses if they wanted further information about how to prepare themselves in order to support their staff. I can happily point folk in the direction of de-escalation training, and there's other stuff out there, there's other education out there that people can access in order to support their staff as well as themselves.
We'll have all those details, not just from Emma, but on our website as well. That's www.dgchamber.co.uk. Lots of questions coming in, which is absolutely fantastic. One of the things that we have in abundance any other year here in Dumfries and Galloway is a whole host of events, a whole host of festivals that people can come through. They come, they bring, they spend their money, which is a great boom for the region. Obviously, that hasn't happened this year. One man that knows a thing or two about that area is Sandy Sweetman. He's been in touch with us this morning. He says, Lee, can you ask Emma, because he has a concern about parts of the event industry in the longer term support for the event sector, and particularly the unseen employees such as those that are mainly freelance or contract. Sandy's concerned that he is fighting on their own to be heard whilst the industry has come to an abrupt and lengthy shutdown. Creative Scotland grants have so far been venue focused, and that hasn't necessarily been trickling down to freelance workers. Can Emma assist our sector? And I think that's an important thing, that freelance sector, that support sector. And right off the top of my head here in Dumfries and Galloway, I'm thinking not just Sandy Sweetman and the team at SW Audio, I'm thinking people like Purple Box Productions, the guys that actually go out and make these festivals and these events happen, who might only be, say, 2 or 3 actual people, but it's the work that they then subcontract down to other businesses and other parties across the region that really need that support.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. I know Sandy actually. I think our Culture Secretary Fiona Hislop has been engaging really well with the whole culture and tourism industry, and she's well aware of some of these issues, like the freelance issues that Sandy talks about is really, really important. And one of the things that I can certainly follow up is what is the current I guess the current proposals or the current support mechanisms for people who are freelance, because we've heard that from other people as well. I know that the Cabinet Secretary has announced like a Museums Resilience and Recovery Fund to be administered by museums and galleries, but obviously that's a separate fund from people who are freelance workers. The self-employed people, which it might be similar to freelance, has been something that has been proposed and supported. And we know that I think there was an additional funding had been proposed or put out by Cabinet Secretary to look specifically at freelance. But it might be that Sandy needs to contact me directly so that I can pick up that specific issue, because we need to, obviously, you know, there's data and management and things like that, but I would be happy to raise that in particular and find out from the Cabinet Secretary what the latest information is for people who are freelance.
We will pass that. We'll make that connection happen. Other questions coming in thick and fast just now. Jason is joining us from Langham. Thank you very much for getting in touch. He says, Lee, on the digital front, addressing broadband and digital infrastructure is important, but what support can be guaranteed from the Scottish Government moving forward to address the significant skills gaps when it comes to individuals as well as businesses? Connecting Scotland was a great emergency response, but it's important to remember that many of our digitally isolated citizens don't interact with services, or they consider themselves vulnerable. And I think that's great that we're moving towards a fully connected country in terms of our R100, as we spoke about before, Emma. But again, there's still a lot of people that just don't have the skills to get online, and even when they do, they don't know what they're doing and how to take that forward, do they?
Yep. Yes, thanks for that. That is interesting. One of the issues that was identified in Benny Higgins' economic recovery report was specifically looking at digital and digital infrastructure. And we do have the Connecting Scotland programme, which is to support people to get digital skills or upskill them. So during this pandemic, one of the questions I asked Christina McKelvey, who's our Minister for Older People, we asked her what can be done to help older people in particular get online. And there's been local authority, there's been volunteers, there's been different support to connect people that way, and obviously upskill digital skills, because you're right, it's easy enough to get online maybe once you're shown, but then what do you do after that? How are we going to direct people to whatever websites will support them or suit them? I know that my own mum, for instance, is she'll be 80 next year. She's been quite prolific in her use of Google during lockdown, and is now learning to do Messenger and use the FaceTime functions and things like that, and that's great, because but what we need to do is obviously look at proper structure and engagement. And I think the skills issue, the skills gaps that Jamie Hepburn is working on is something that is being developed as well. And all of these processes, some of the digital skills was already being implemented, and then lockdown happened. So what we need to do is obviously make sure that lockdown hasn't inhibited that from progressing, and we need to keep moving that forward. So our secretaries managing digital skills, and the connectivity aspect is something that will continue. I know the local authority are also engaging in digital skills enhancement as well.
Okay, let's stick with the digital theme just now. We've had a question come in from Castle Douglas. Sarah in Castle Douglas, good morning. Thank you for getting in touch. If you have a question to pose, as I say, lee.med@dgchamber.co.uk, or stick it in the question and answer box. Sarah says, Lee, I work with the startup company which has been testing and is ready to with a solution for wireless connectivity for over 2,000 homes in Dumfries and Galloway. The R100 programme you've been talking about has been delayed several times. Does Emma know when the voucher scheme will be announced? My fear is that this company, which is ready to start up in Dumfries and Galloway, providing employment, will up sticks and move to Wales, where the voucher scheme currently exists. I think that is a very interesting question. Potential jobs could be moving unless we actually know when these things are ready to roll out, Emma.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I would be happy to pick up later as well. I'm aware that Paul Wheelhouse is ready to make announcements about R100 and the voucher scheme. We know that also Russell Griggs, who's the chair of our new South Scotland agency, which is separate from Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise, but South Scotland Agency, which was launched on April the 1st, has got a digital subgroup that is looking at how do we support everybody. So that might be something that your caller from Castle Douglas might want to engage. If they haven't done already, I'd be happy to link up. But I would hate to hear that any company would up sticks and move because of the voucher scheme that's already established in Wales, when we're about to launch it in Scotland. And Paul Wheelhouse, last I spoke to him, I don't know when he's making an announcement, but that's something that's coming really soon.
You mentioned there, obviously, the new agency, the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency, has been in existence since April the 1st this year. Obviously, they have launched into something that they were all of us completely unaware from. How have you viewed from the outside the impact of the new agency in its opening 4 months? Obviously, very much learning on its feet.
Well, the new agency now seems to have 45 employees, and it's going to be adding some more. Russell Griggs accepted my invite to the Farmers Market, which is held at Dumfries Railway Station, first market since lockdown. lockdown was last Sunday. So Russell Griggs, the chair, came with me to meet some of the businesses, and some of those businesses have actually already been helped by the agency through me writing to them as well. So the agency, established on April the 1st, hit the ground running, helping support businesses during that had been affected by lockdown. And so when I spoke to Russell about that as we were at the market, he said that now they're starting to do what the enterprise was supposed to do, which is engage with businesses, and small businesses, large businesses. They have a commitment for food and drink, which, as you mentioned earlier, Lee, is really important for us in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got various farmers markets across the region, and some of the new small micro businesses, that's often where they start in order to get a foothold into a market. So Russell has been really good. The agency has been really good at like seeking new businesses, listening, supporting many of the new businesses, and especially the focus of food and drink is really good. But there's been other businesses that have been helped, and Alpha Solway was one of those businesses that's been helped with through the new enterprise agency in order to create hopefully 200 jobs in between Annan and Dumfries. So that's really, really good news that 200 jobs are coming to our area. So it looks like the agency has hit the ground running. It looks like they are making inroads already into engaging with businesses. And a couple of the agency members are accompanying me to 3 gardens coming up to visit Professor Pod's and his chili plants. So, and that's another new business that we're trying to engage as well, because we know that we've got farmers across the region that are, you know, beef and sheep farmers, and now we've got a chili farmer as well that needs to be supported. So the agency for me has been really receptive and really engaging, and it looks like now that they've got a wider employee base as well, that they'll be able to, you know, do what they said they're going to do, which is help the businesses, new businesses and current businesses across the region.
Just on one final thing on the agents there, do you think enough people actually, including businesses, actually understand what the agency is? Because of course, during the setup for this, there was very much a view of it couldn't just be a replica of Scottish Enterprise or Highlands and Islands. Of course, and our agency is unique in as much it also looks after, or has the potential to look after, cultural and historical parts in its remit as well, which it could sometimes be a little bit confusing by mixing all those areas.
Yeah, I think we've had some feedback that people, they've heard about an agency, but they don't really know what it does. So I'm sure that one of the issues that Professor Griggs can highlight is the purpose, the objectives, and the aims, obviously, of the agency, because the new agency is separate from Scottish Enterprise. It is tailored for our South Scotland region, which is very rural, and there's all these smaller businesses, some with only 2 employees, some with, you know, single-handed folk. So Professor Griggs is well aware of the I guess the diversity of our businesses, and is willing to engage and hear from a lot of them. We've been able to, as part of my input and my feedback, some of the businesses we've directly linked to the agency to see how they can support them. I look forward to, you know, the website being, you know, engaged with more often. The Facebook is a go-to place. It's like one of the first things people search for is on social media is Facebook, to look at the business and what it's doing. So perhaps it's an action item from me for today, is to ask the agency to maybe lay out some key policies across the region, small and large.
No, I think that's a good one. And we've been talking about food and drink over the past few minutes. And again, it is a key element of Dumfries and Galloway's economy. Local food and drink providers played a key role during lockdown, keeping us fed, especially in rural areas. How do we keep Dumfries and Galloway's food and drink, the Enfield natural larder that we have, at the top of the table and encourage people to keep buying local now that we're back to a new normal and we can get to the supermarkets? Andrea's asked that question. I think it's a couple of really important things in there.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. That is a really important question. When we had the Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewan at Rural Committee before Parliament broke up, he specifically spoke about supply chains, and not just supply chains across Europe and the world. He talked about supply chains that were local. That's something that I'm passionate about. I go to the farmers market on the first Sunday of every month. I go to Kirkcudbright Farmers Market. I'm engaging now with Stranraer, which have a wee farmers market that we're trying to look at. We know that one of the businesses in the Isle of Whithorn, Alistair Schooler at the Steam Packet, started a bakery during lockdown to help support local people and local supply. And Rowan's Dairy have been fantastic in expanding their milk delivery to areas like far and wide in Dumfries and Galloway. And and that's been really, really beneficial. And they're not just doing milk now, they're doing juice and stuff as well. So local supply chains and encouraging people to shop local is something that I will continue to promote and support, because we've already seen that in the agriculture and farmers buy their diesel local, they get their tractors sorted by local mechanics. So the farmers are already doing that, but I would love to just keep expanding that for everybody to recognise the power of our local producers, and what they have done during this COVID has been fantastic, from doorstep deliveries to opening at various hours and online ordering. So the food and drink and supply chain, keeping it local, it's huge. I've already done work to ask the local authority what they're doing for procurement, so local procurement for schools, for instance. East Ayrshire have managed to do a phenomenal job and have won awards in their supply chains being local or for procurement. So that's something I think for all of us working together, we can certainly achieve that and make sure that people are aware of all our local businesses that are fantastic.
It has been great to see the return during the lockdown of savour the flavours. You know, that for so long was flying the flag of everything that was great and good about the food and drink sector here in Dumfries and Galloway.
Yeah, Savour the Flavours is something that happened before I moved back from California. But when, you know, as a newly elected member, I met one of the Savour the Flavours proponents, and she was able to help me learn about what it meant. And, you know, we do have some great local businesses that really we could be then helping punt into, like our cities like Glasgow and obviously in Carlisle as well. It's just a massive population just on our doorstep. So the Savour the Flavours model, looking at how we can expand that, how we can make people aware of the fact that we've got a chilli farmer in Dumfries and Galloway, or we've got gin makers and jam makers and fantastic produce. We've got a local yoghurt factory right at Polnure. So if we can help raise awareness of all these businesses, I mean, that's something that we do. It's something I do in debates in Chamber. We have a food and drink debate every year in Chamber, and it's an ideal opportunity for members to highlight the businesses that are right on our own doorstep.
During Scottish Food Fortnight, Dumfries and Galloway used to lead the way, thanks to Savour the Flavours. Could this really be the start of Dumfries and Galloway being a national leader in food and drink again?
Definitely. One of the things that I got into a bit of a Twitter fight about a couple of years ago when I said that Dumfries and Galloway had the best food and drink on the planet. And I was told, how can I say that? Because it's not. And I'm like, well, come and challenge me on it. So I think we should be big and bold in the language that we use and say, you know, our Galloway beef is fantastic. Our whiskey at Bladnoch is well worth a dram. Our gin at Newton Stewart they're so creative, and they've got these wonderful flavoured gin cocktails now. We should be saying that. I'll be the first to jump from the rafters and say we have the best food and drink on the planet, and come and test it and make your own decisions, everybody.
I am not going to disagree with you. My waistline can testify to the quality of food across Dumfries and Galloway. And again, that quality of food is something that you are so passionate about, Emma. You want to ensure that those standards are maintained, not just now, but moving into the future as well. So much so, you're actually hosting a virtual round table this coming Monday night, aren't you?
Yes, and before I mention that, I forgot to mention we've got the best oysters on the planet as well. And the Stranraer Oyster Festival obviously won't go ahead this year. And, and I'm just reminded that, the scallops that come into Kirkcudbright are, they're eaten across the world as well. So we have a lot to celebrate, and the standards is part of what we should be promoting: the best welfare, the best processes of growing without pesticides, for instance. So that does bring me to the online event that I'm hosting on Monday. It's a online event called Farm to Fork, Standards Matter, and I've got two farmers that are coming to basically present about why standards matter, and talk about the food processing and producing, and the transportation, as well as the comparisons between UK animal health and welfare and food standards and other countries, because it's really important right now to do this ahead of our exit from the European Union, which we're in a transition period right now. So on the 1st of January, we'll be out for good. And for me, I wanted to make sure that people understood what it means when we hear about hormone chicken and chlorinated beef, hormone beef and chlorinated chicken, but it probably is both either way. But it's because it's not just about that. We hear about it and we read about it in the papers. And I want to make sure that we can hear from the farm experts so that they can help people, I guess, raise awareness of the different issues of rearing our animals and getting them to market and processing. That I think it's really important that we promote and protect our farmers, not just in Scotland, but across the rest of the UK as well.
It is so important. If you want to find out more details about that, you can head on over to our website, dgchamber.co.uk. All the details are on the news pages of that. A couple more questions, if I can, Emma. I know we're rapidly running out of time, but I'm sure we can squeeze another couple in. Stuart has been in touch. Good morning, Stuart. It says, Lee, can you ask Emma, how can local procurement work when the Scottish Government at times creates national frameworks, which in some cases take money out of Scotland? Local suppliers find they cannot get on the council supplier list due to national framework agreements being in place. That's a great question, because we've heard this time and time again. Lots of people want to be involved in procurement, but either they can't get themselves on lists because of their size, because you have to be a certain size. How is it possible? It's great that we hear that it's something that you want to drive forward, but how is that actually going to happen when there is national frameworks in place?
Yeah, no, that is a great question from Stuart. I'm just reading it in front of me, actually. It's something that the Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewan has spoke about. So when he came to committee, he did talk about supply chains and that process. We know that East Ayrshire Council has managed to do it. And when I first wrote to Dumfries and Galloway Council, when I was a newly elected member, the response I got was basically, no, we're not changing that process. But now that we've seen the engagement of people to look at local procurement and local supplies, I think it's something that we can definitely pursue. So my understanding is that Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing is already going to take this forward and look at it. And that he obviously isn't the only Cabinet Secretary involved. Kevin Stewart is our Communities Minister, and then the whole supply procurement process is something that depending on which Cabinet Secretary is the lead on it, I will commit to writing to them to see what can we do to change the procurement processes so that some of our D&G suppliers can get onto the national framework agreements. This coronavirus pandemic has demonstrated that the fragility of the food supply chain, and I know that the Cabinet will be discussing many issues in order to help make sure that Scotland is secure in our supply chain. So if Stuart wants to contact me directly, I would be happy to keep him in the loop about that and actually hear suggestions and ideas, because specific examples help me take this forward with the likes of Fergus Ewing and other Cabinet Secretaries.
That's great, Stuart. We'll make sure that connection happens. It's been in the papers over the last 24 hours. Warnock Head, the highest village in Scotland, I believe, is looking to go ahead with buying some land from Buccleuch Estates. And something similar has came up in the questions this morning. Roland has been in touch. He says, Lee, prohibitively high valuations are being put on land which organisations such as the Langham Initiative wish to buy for the local community. Can Emma offer any advice? Is there anything the Scottish Government can do to legislate against valuers coming up with inflated valuations based on artificially generated market demand? And we are seeing more and more of these initiatives, these communities trying to take ownership of where they are, aren't they?
Yes, that's good news for the residents of Warnock Head. I know that's been many years in planning and processing. The community's right to buy initiative has been great for many communities. We've seen islands purchased by community groups, and now people are moving to those islands in order to help support the population of the places. And for our areas, like if landowners are putting inflated prices on the land, and then either to dissuade communities or basically reap the benefits of higher pricing, that's something that personally I don't have any experience of, but it's something we can absolutely look at investigating further to see what can be done. There's many rules around land and contracts that are reserved to Westminster, but it might be that some of this land valuation and land and buildings transaction taxation type rules might be able to support preventing artificial inflation of land. That's something I can have a wee Google of the government website to see if that's something that I can help take forward.
Thank you so much for that one. And Emma, we're going to let you go in just a second, but there's one final question I need to ask here. And again, it's looking to the future. We're in an exciting place just now, regardless of what is going on here in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got the creation and launch in April, as you mentioned before, of the new agency. But at the same time, we are slap bang, we are part of the Borderlands growth deal. Which one of these two opportunities allows Dumfries and Galloway to grow the biggest and the best moving forward, in your opinion?
Well, it's interesting that the South Scotland Agency, as we've talked about, has hit the ground running since April 1st. They've already actioned business support like Alpha Solway as part of it, and the Borderlands growth deal. Every time I try and seek an update about it, there seems to be we're waiting, we're processing, and so, but there's a lot of money involved in the commitment for borderlands. Scottish Government has committed £85 million, and the UK Government has committed to 65 for us north of the border. So that's an interesting 20 million difference already. But I've already written to Michael Matheson for an update for our side of the border, for the Borderlands growth deal. But I think if we can focus on how do we attract people to the region, and if the Borderlands can be part of that and the agency part of that, that's great. One of the things that I'm keen to pursue is a medical school at the Crichton, and so that we would have an approach where maybe one of the universities that already have established a medical school could then have a hub and spoke model. So the university at Crichton could be the host for a medical school. That would hopefully encourage young people to go to university in our own region. So I would be, I'm keen to see that the Borderlands is successful, and I'd like to hope that it will be, because our region obviously has a very rural population, it has an older population. We want to encourage young professional families to move here and work here, and we've seen that that can happen with people working from home. So I'd like to see that whatever initiative that's taken forward, that it works for the whole of the region. We've got an East Pier at Stranraer that needs sorted, and there's Borderlands money committed to that. But I wonder how many folk in Stranraer consider that they live in the Borderlands, because Stranraer is actually closer to a different border over the water at Belfast and Larne. So I think I want to see the whole region for Dumfries and Galloway benefit from anything. And I think right now we need to be shining the light on our region. And I think that is happening with what we're seeing with the commitment from Scottish Government and now UK Government as well for us in the south.
It's going to be an interesting few years. All the eyes most definitely going to be here on Dumfries and Galloway and the south of Scotland. That is our time up. I'd like to say thank you to everyone that's joined us this morning on this chat. If you want to go back and watch it again, it will be up available on the DGChamber YouTube channel from around about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And you can keep an eye on our website, dgchamber.co.uk, for more of these events over the next few weeks and months. Emma, I'd like to say thank you so much to yourself for taking the time to make this happen this morning. If people want to follow what you are up to, I'm assuming they can do that on social media.
Absolutely. I've got my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook page, and of course there's a website as well. So there's a lot going on. I'm always out and about, and I've got a good wee video maker in order to help me get messages across to people as well.
Thank you so much for joining us. As I say, keep an eye on what's going on by visiting the website dgchamber.co.uk, and keep an eye on your inbox to see what's going on with your local chamber. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you one more time to Emma Harper MSP.
Thank you. Thanks very much.